A lot of people treat abandoned places like they're some kind of game. They see a broken window, a rusted chain link fence, a building with its lights long gone, and they think it's exciting. A place like that feels separate from the rest of the world. Like normal rules stop applying the second you step inside. Some people go for the photos. Some go for the adrenaline. Some go because they think nothing bad ever really happens. But sometimes, a place is abandoned for a reason. Sometimes what waits inside isn't some wild animal, or a homeless person, or a security guard trying to scare people off. Sometimes it's something worse. These are 3 stories about abandoned places to explore. When I was 19, I used to go out with 2 friends almost every weekend looking for abandoned places around our town. It started innocent enough. We'd drive out to old farmhouses, closed gas stations, empty warehouses near the highway. Half the fun was just finding them. We'd sit in somebody's car with energy drinks and cheap fast food, scrolling through old forums and local Facebook posts, looking for places people said were creepy. It was one of my friends, Derek, who found the old nursing home. He sent me and Josh a screenshot in our group chat late on a Thursday night. It was this blurry picture of a 3-story brick building behind a line of dead trees. The caption under it said something like, "Closed in 2009 after asbestos issues. Still standing. Easy way in through the back." Derek wrote, "Friday night?" Josh replied right away, "Absolutely." I had work early the next morning, but that didn't stop me from saying yes too. The nursing home was about 40 minutes outside town, down a narrow road that turned from pavement into cracked gravel the farther we went. There were no streetlights out there. No houses close by. Just stretches of woods, a few open fields, and power lines cutting across the dark sky. I remember it had rained earlier that day, because the road was wet and the tires kept kicking up little sprays of dirty water. Derek was driving. Josh was in the passenger seat, messing with the Bluetooth, trying to find music that matched the mood. I was in the back seat, looking out the window, watching tree branches flash by in the headlights. The building appeared almost all at once. 1 second it was just woods, and then suddenly there it was, huge and black and blocky against the night. The front sign was half torn down. I could still make out the word cedar on it, but the rest was either rusted away or hanging loose. The place looked wrong even from the car. Not haunted movie wrong. Just empty in a way that felt too complete, like it had been dead for a long time. Derek parked in the weeds off the road and killed the headlights. For a second none of us said anything. Then Josh laughed under his breath and said, "That is way bigger than I thought." We each used our phone flashlights because Derek forgot to bring the lanterns he said he had. That already annoyed me. It meant we'd be depending on weak lights and dying batteries inside an abandoned building in the middle of nowhere. The air outside smelled like wet dirt and old leaves. Somewhere off in the woods, I could hear frogs and the occasional snapping of branches under our shoes as we crossed the field toward the building. The back entrance had a steel door hanging half open. Derek grinned like he'd discovered treasure. "Easy," he said. Inside, it smelled like mold, dust, and that damp stale air abandoned buildings always have. The kind that feels heavier than normal air. The beam from my flashlight moved over peeling wallpaper, overturned wheelchairs, water-stained ceiling tiles on the floor. There was a reception desk near the back hallway with old papers scattered everywhere. A calendar hung on the wall behind it, still open to a month from more than a decade earlier. I remember staring at it longer than I should have, thinking about the fact that somebody had looked at that calendar every day once. Somebody had worked there. Somebody had lived there. Then one day it all just stopped. Josh wandered into what looked like a common room. "This place is perfect," he called out. "You could make a movie in here." Derek was already filming on his phone, whispering fake ghost hunter commentary. "We are now entering the west wing of Cedar, whatever this place is." I told him to shut up because his voice was echoing down the halls. That was the first thing I noticed. The echo. The building didn't just repeat sound. It stretched it. Even small noises seemed to go farther than they should have. Our footsteps felt too loud. A soft laugh turned into this weird bouncing sound down the corridor. We moved from room to room, checking patient bedrooms. Most were empty except for broken furniture, old curtains, and medical equipment that looked too outdated to be worth stealing. In one room, there was a stuffed bear on the floor covered in dust so thick it looked gray instead of brown. In another, there were family photos still pinned to a corkboard. That bothered me more than anything else. When people leave places in a hurry, they leave things behind. But when they leave photos behind, it makes the place feel less abandoned and more interrupted. About 20 minutes in, Derek said he wanted to go upstairs. I remember saying, "Why?" He shrugged. "Because that's where the good stuff always is." Josh laughed and followed him. The stairwell was concrete, narrow, and colder than the rest of the building. Our lights bounced off the walls and made it hard to judge distance. Every step made a hollow clunk that traveled up and down the staircase. On the second floor, the rooms were in worse shape. The windows were mostly broken. Rain had gotten in. The hallway carpet was black with water damage. One of the doors had deep scratch marks near the handle, which Josh immediately decided had to be from some crazy old resident. Derek took pictures while I stood there staring at the marks. They looked fresh. Not brand new, but not 10 years old either. I told myself it was just because the wood under the paint was lighter. We kept going. At the far end of the hall there was a nurse's station with a glass partition that had been shattered inward. I stepped around the broken glass carefully, shining my light over filing cabinets and shelves. A lot of the drawers were half open. Papers were everywhere. Josh picked up a folder and read a name out loud like it was funny. "Don't do that," I said. He looked at me and smiled. "What, you think they're listening?" I don't know why, but that made the hair on my arms rise. Maybe because of how quiet it got after he said it. No frogs. No distant road noise. Not even the drip of water from the ceiling. Just silence. Then, from somewhere above us, came a sound. A single long scrape. Like a chair being dragged slowly across a hard floor. All three of us froze. Derek was the first to speak. "You guys heard that, right?" Nobody answered because obviously we had. The sound came again. Scrape. Longer this time. Directly overhead. Josh tried to laugh it off. "Probably an animal." "In shoes?" I asked. Because beneath that dragging noise I'd heard something else. A weight shift. A step. Derek's face lost some color. "There's a third floor?" "There is," I said. "You really didn't look this place up at all, did you?" He ignored that. "Maybe there's somebody else here." That possibility should have made me want to leave. It did, technically. But fear has this weird effect where it sometimes makes people more curious instead of smarter. Josh whispered, "Let's just peek." I wish I had said no. I wish I had turned around and walked back to the car by myself. Instead, I followed them up the second flight of stairs. The third floor was different the second we stepped onto it. The air smelled worse. Not like mold. Like something sour. The hallway was narrower, with more doors, and unlike the rest of the building, there were still a few ceiling lights hanging intact, even though none of them worked. Their long white covers swung slightly, like they'd been moved recently. My flashlight passed over a sign on the wall that said Memory Care Unit. I remember that specifically. Alzheimer's patients. Dementia patients. People who wandered. Josh read it too and said in a lower voice than before, "Okay, that's creepy." At the end of the hall, to the left, was a wide area that might have been a day room or lounge. That's where the scrape had come from. Derek moved first, angling his phone and flashlight into the room. There was nothing there. At first. Just overturned chairs, a TV cart, curtains hanging crooked from the windows. Then my light moved across the far wall and landed on a wheelchair. Someone was sitting in it. I think the only reason I didn't scream was because my brain took a second to understand what I was seeing. It was an old woman. At least I thought it was. Thin white hair. Pale face. A hospital gown. She was sitting perfectly still in the wheelchair facing the wall, so all we could really see was the side of her head and one shoulder. Josh said, barely above a whisper, "What the hell?" Derek took a step into the room. "Ma'am?" No response. I remember this awful cold feeling in my stomach, because it made no sense. The building had been closed for years. Derek tried again. "Hello?" The woman moved. Not much. Just enough to tilt her head. And then I saw it. The skin on the side of her face looked too tight, too pale, stretched over bone. Her mouth was open slightly. Not moving. Just hanging that way. I said, "Derek, don't." But he kept going, maybe because he thought it was a homeless person, or maybe because he didn't want to look scared in front of us. When he got about 10 feet from the wheelchair, his light fully hit the figure. It wasn't a person. It was a mannequin. Or something made to look like a patient. Its face had been painted in a sick flesh color. Someone had put a wig on it. The gown was real, though, and stained dark in places. Josh swore loudly. Derek spun around and snapped. "Dude, not funny." "I didn't do that," Josh said. "Then who did?" Nobody answered. Because all three of us were thinking the same thing. Someone had put that there. Not years ago either. The gown wasn't dusty. The chair tracks on the floor looked recent. Even the wig looked clean compared to everything else in the building. And then we heard the voice. From behind us. Very soft. "Don't leave me." It was so close it sounded like somebody speaking right over my shoulder. I whipped around so fast I nearly fell. The hallway was empty. Josh shouted, "Nope. We're done. We're done." Then from one of the nearby rooms, there came a little metallic ding. Like the press of an old nurse call button. Ding. Then another farther away. Ding. Then one down the hall behind us. Ding. 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 I don't know if it was wired somehow, or battery powered, or if someone had rigged the whole floor just to mess with people. I don't care. All I know is that within seconds it sounded like call lights were going off in different rooms all around us. And then I saw movement at the far end of the hallway. A person. Tall. Thin. Standing halfway in shadow. At first I thought it was just some guy, Maybe a squatter. But something about the way he stood made my chest tighten. He wasn't surprised to see us. He wasn't angry either. He was just watching. His head looked shaved, and he was wearing what might have been old scrubs, pale blue or gray in the flashlight glare. Derek shouted, "Hey!" The man didn't answer. He took one slow step sideways and disappeared into a room. That broke us. We turned and ran. Not movie screaming, not tripping over each other, just that raw stupid panic where your body moves before your mind catches up. We hit the stairwell so fast Derek almost slammed into the railing. Our footsteps thundered down the concrete stairs. Somewhere above us, I heard that dragging sound again. Only now it was faster. Like something being pulled quickly. Second floor. First floor. Back hallway. Door. We burst outside into the cold air and sprinted through the wet grass toward the car. Derek fumbled his keys twice before unlocking it. We got inside, he started the engine, and we tore out of there, gravel spitting from the tires. None of us spoke for maybe a full minute. Then Josh said, "Tell me you got that on video." Derek didn't answer. "Derek?" He gripped the wheel harder and said, "My phone's gone." I looked at him. "What?" "It's gone." He patted his pockets, then checked the seat, the floor, the cup holder like it might magically appear. "I had it in the lounge," he said. "I had it when we saw that thing in the wheelchair." Josh turned halfway around in his seat. "You dropped it?" "I guess." Nobody said what we were all thinking. That it was still in the building. At a red light 10 minutes later, Derek checked Find My iPhone on Josh's phone. The location came up almost instantly. It showed his phone still at the nursing home. But not in the building. Out by the road. Moving. We all stared at the screen. The little dot shifted slowly away from the property and into the woods across from it. Then it stopped. Derek whispered, "No." Josh said, "Somebody took it." None of us went back. Derek canceled the phone the next day and tried to pretend it was no big deal, but he stopped suggesting exploration trips after that. Josh did too. I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the hallway, or the fake patient in the wheelchair, or that voice behind me. About a week later, I got curious and looked up the nursing home online again. This time I found an old local article about why it closed. The official reason was health violations and asbestos. But buried in the article was one line about a staff member who had been arrested years earlier after living inside an unused wing without authorization. He'd been an overnight orderly. According to the article, several residents had complained that he was moving them after hours and recreating routines after they'd already been put to bed. The article didn't explain what that meant. The man's name was never listed. But there was one attached photo from outside the courthouse. It was blurry. Still, I could make out the shaved head. And the pale scrub top. I told myself that had to be a coincidence. I told myself that maybe he'd never really gone away. Maybe he'd stayed around that building long after it shut down. That explanation is bad enough. But it's not the part that still bothers me most. A month after we went there, Derek got a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was his phone. Clean. Charged. Fully working. No damage at all. The videos from that night were still on it, except for the last one. The one from the third floor. That file was there, but it wouldn't open. Just a black thumbnail and a timestamp of 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Derek tried sending it to me and Josh, but it always failed. Then one night, while he was at home alone, the file opened by itself. He told us this the next day, and I believed him because Derek was pale and shaking when he said it. He said the screen was black for almost the whole video. You could hear breathing, footsteps. The nurse called dings in the background. Then the camera lifted, like someone else was holding the phone now. And for 1 second, the video showed the three of us running into the stairwell. Filmed from the end of the hall. From behind. After that, the camera turned slowly toward the lounge. Toward the wheelchair. The mannequin was gone. In its place, facing the camera, was a real old woman in a stained gown. And just before the video ended, she opened her mouth and said in a dry, cracking voice, "Don't leave me here again." The second story happened to my cousin Aaron, and unlike the first one, this wasn't some random trip for fun. He actually had a reason to be there. Aaron worked with a guy named Mike who was obsessed with metal detecting, old bottles, and local history. He was always talking about abandoned properties that hadn't been touched in decades. According to him, one of the best spots in the county was an old hotel in the woods about an hour north of the city. Not a motel. A real old hotel from the 1900s, back when wealthy people used to take trains out there for weekend retreats. The place had shut down sometime in the 70s after a fire in one wing and some ownership dispute that apparently dragged on forever. The road leading to it had washed out years later, so almost nobody went there anymore except hunters, explorers, or people who liked trespassing. Mike had gone once before in daylight and came back swearing there were still old fixtures, china, maybe even valuable antiques inside if nobody had stripped the place yet. So he talked Aaron into going with him on a Sunday afternoon in late October. Aaron told me he didn't want to at first. He wasn't really into abandoned places. But Mike promised it would be quick. In and out before dark. That should have been the first sign not to go, because any plan that includes the words, "before dark," usually turns into the opposite. They drove Mike's pickup to the edge of an old logging trail and parked there. From that point on they had to walk the rest of the way. Aaron said the hike itself was eerie, just because of how quiet the woods were. The leaves were mostly down. The trees looked thin and dead. The ground was wet and soft, and covered in rotting leaves that stuck to their boots. Mike had a backpack with flashlights, gloves, rope, and 2 walkie-talkies even though they were only 2 people. Aaron asked him why he brought the radios. Mike said, "Just in case we split up." Aaron should have turned back right then. The hotel sat in a clearing beyond the trees, bigger than either of them expected. It wasn't one building exactly. It was like a central lodge with 2 attached wings and a wraparound porch that had mostly collapsed. The windows were dark holes. Part of the roof on the left side had caved in. Vines climbed the brick walls and disappeared into broken gutters. Aaron said it looked less abandoned and more swallowed. Mike loved it immediately. He just stood there grinning and said, "You see this? Nobody's touched this place." Aaron pointed out the empty beer cans near the porch, the broken lock on a side entrance, and the tire tracks in the mud not far from the trail. Mike waved it off. "People come near it. Doesn't mean they go in." Inside, the lobby was enormous. There was a grand staircase splitting in 2 directions, a stone fireplace blackened with soot, and a chandelier on the floor in pieces. Rain had gotten in through the ceiling and made the warped hardwood shine in patches where the light came through. Aaron said the place smelled like wet ash even after all those years. Mike started checking behind the front desk and inside cabinets right away, looking for old keys, menus, anything collectible. Aaron mostly followed him around, feeling uneasy. He kept hearing small noises deeper in the building. Nothing dramatic. Just little knocks, creaks, and occasional thumps that could have been water or settling wood. But every time he stopped to listen, Mike kept moving, kept talking, kept acting like this was some treasure hunt. They explored the dining room, then a lounge area, then some first-floor guest rooms that had already been wrecked by time and vandals. Most of them were empty. A few had mattresses with springs sticking out. One room had children's drawings on the wall that were definitely newer than the hotel itself. That made Aaron ask, "You think people party here?" Mike said, "Probably. That's why we go upstairs." The second floor had a long balcony overlooking the lobby. The carpet was ruined. There were dead leaves all over the hall, blown in from missing windows. A lot of the room doors were hanging open. At one point Aaron looked over the railing toward the front doors and noticed something outside. A vehicle. Not on the trail. Closer. He told Mike. "There's a truck out front." Mike came over and looked down. That wasn't there before. It was an older dark pickup, parked crooked near the edge of the clearing. Neither of them had heard it arrive. Aaron said, "Maybe somebody else is here." Mike didn't answer for a second. Then he said, "Let's just keep moving. If they're exploring too, who cares?" Aaron did care, but before he could argue, Mike headed farther down the hall. At the very end of the right wing they found the old ballroom. The doors were huge, one hanging off its hinges. Inside was this massive room with a stage at one end, tall windows along one wall, and rows of stacked chairs against the back. Mold-covered parts of the wallpaper in dark flower shapes. The wood floor was buckled and soft in places. That room was where things started getting really bad. Mike saw a set of double doors behind the stage and got excited, thinking they probably led to storage. Aaron stayed on the ballroom floor while Mike climbed up onto the stage and disappeared through one of the doors. A few seconds later Mike shouted, "Yo, get up here!" Aaron went over and climbed onto the stage. Behind the door was a narrow service hallway with shelves along the walls, old event supplies, and what looked like costumes or uniforms hanging inside a half-open closet. But what Mike was staring at was farther down the hall. There was a bed there. Not an old hotel bed. A newer one. A cot, basically. Military style. Next to it were canned food, gallon jugs of water, batteries, a lantern, and a portable radio. Someone was living there. Aaron said his whole body went cold when he saw it. He whispered, "We need to go." Mike, for once, agreed immediately. As they turned to leave, they heard footsteps out in the ballroom. Heavy ones? Not just one person either. At least two. Mike killed his flashlight. Aaron did the same. The only light now was weak gray daylight from the ballroom windows and a sliver from under the service door. The footsteps moved slowly across the floor outside. Then a voice said, "I know somebody's in here." It was a man's voice. Deep. Calm. Not angry. That made it worse somehow. Another voice farther back said, "I saw lights." Aaron told me that's the moment he realized they weren't dealing with random explorers. The voices were too steady. Too practiced. Like this had happened before. Mike leaned close and whispered, "We wait." Aaron wanted to push past him and run, but there was no way to do that without going right into the ballroom. So they stayed there in the dark, listening. The men outside walked around for what felt like forever. Floorboards creaked. Chairs scraped. One of them coughed. At some point somebody climbed up onto the stage because Aaron heard the boards groan much closer. Then came the worst sound. The service door handles slowly turning. Once. Then again harder. The door didn't open because Mike had instinctively slid a rusted metal shelf in front of it a few inches earlier without even making much noise. The man outside stopped. Then he said, very close now, "You boys need help?" No answer. A long pause. Then, almost friendly, he said, "You came into the wrong place." The footsteps moved away after that. Aaron and Mike waited another full minute before doing anything. Mike raised one of the walkie-talkies and whispered into it without thinking, "Stay quiet." The radio on the shelf beside the cot answered with a burst of static. Then a voice from the ballroom shouted, "Back room!" It's almost funny in a horrible way, like something from a bad movie. One stupid mistake. Aaron and Mike shoved the shelf away and ran deeper into the service hall because going back through the ballroom was impossible now. At the end of the hall was a narrow stairwell spiraling down. Maybe used by staff decades earlier. They flew down it, nearly falling. The stairs led to a basement corridor under the ballroom wing. Dirt floor in some places, concrete in others. Pipes overhead. The smell down there was awful, like mildew and oil and trapped air. Behind them, they could hear the men entering the stairwell. Mike said, "This way," and just picked a direction. Aaron followed because he had no better idea. Their flashlights shook as they ran past storage rooms, old laundry equipment, and boiler tanks. The basement seemed to go on forever. More than once Aaron said, "Do you know where we are?" And Mike never answered. Then they reached a four-way split in the corridor. That's where they made the dumbest decision of the day. Instead of staying together, Mike said, "We split. Better chance one of us gets out." Aaron actually argued with him for a second. But then they heard the men coming closer, and panic made the choice for them. Mike shoved one walkie-talkie into Aaron's hand and ran left. Aaron went right. He told me that was the most alone he had ever felt in his life. The basement corridor on his side grew narrower and rougher, less like hotel structure and more like maintenance tunnels. The walls changed from concrete to stone in places. He kept his flashlight low, trying not to broadcast exactly where he was, but that also meant he almost tripped twice. Into the walkie-talkie he whispered, "Mike?" Nothing. Then static. Then Mike's voice, breathless. "I found a door. Mike, go outside." Aaron whispered, "Where?" No response. Just more static. Then another sound came through the radio. Not Mike. A man's voice. Very close to Mike's radio. "Where's your friend?" The line went dead. Aaron stopped walking. He said he knew in that moment that either Mike had been caught, or one of the men had picked up Mike's radio. Either way, answering would be the worst possible thing he could do. So he shut the radio off completely. Ahead of him was a steel door with flaking green paint. It was partly open. Beyond it was what looked like an old wine cellar, lined with empty racks. He slipped inside and quietly pulled the door almost shut, leaving just enough gap to see out. Then he waited. A few minutes later he saw a light moving in the corridor. It wasn't swinging around wildly. It moved slowly and steadily, checking corners, sweeping low. The person carrying it stopped just outside the cellar door. Aaron could see the boots first. Muddy work boots. Then the beam of the flashlight crossed the gap in the door and paused. A man spoke in a soft voice. "You don't need to hide down here." Aaron didn't breathe. The man waited. Then he said, "Your friend's okay." Aaron told me that part terrified him more than if the man had threatened him. Because the voice sounded patient. Like he genuinely expected Aaron to trust him. The flashlight beam moved away eventually. Aaron stayed in the cellar for what he guessed was 20 minutes. He said he could hear occasional footsteps, distant doors, once even what sounded like somebody dragging something heavy across the floor upstairs. When he finally worked up the nerve to move, he noticed something in the back of the cellar. Another door. Small. Wooden. Half hidden behind fallen racks. He squeezed through it, and found a low tunnel sloping upward through packed dirt and stone. It looked hand-built, old enough to predate the hotel itself. Maybe some kind of storage passage or spring tunnel. He didn't know and didn't care. It was barely big enough to crawl through in places. He said he kept expecting it to dead end, but instead, after what felt like 100 feet, he saw weak daylight ahead. The tunnel opened behind a cluster of brush on a hill behind the hotel. By then it was almost dark. Aaron ran down the hill, through the woods, back toward the trail as fast as he could. He fell twice. Lost one shoe in mud and had to keep going. When he finally reached the truck, Mike wasn't there. And neither was Mike's pickup. For a second Aaron thought maybe Mike had gotten out another way and left. But Mike's backpack was still in Aaron's truck. So were Mike's keys. Aaron called 911 from the road because he didn't get any signal near the hotel. Police went out there that night. They found the hotel, obviously. They found signs that people had been staying there. Food, sleeping areas, tools, hunting knives, radios. But they did not find Mike. And they did not find the two men Aaron had heard. According to the police, by the time they got there, whoever was using the hotel had cleared out. Aaron spent months dealing with detectives and giving statements. A search was done around the property, then wider through the woods. Nothing. Mike was officially listed as missing. That alone would be enough to ruin somebody for life. But there's one reason Aaron refuses to talk about it now unless somebody pushes him. About 3 weeks after Mike vanished, Aaron got a package at his apartment. No return address. Inside was one of the walkie-talkies. The one Mike had been carrying. Aaron almost threw it out right away, but curiosity got to him. He put batteries in it. For a while, nothing happened. Then late one night, while it sat on his kitchen counter, it crackled to life on its own. At first it was just static. Then footsteps. Then a voice. Not one of the men. Mike. Faint. Like he was far away, or underground. Aaron told me he only made out one full sentence before the signal broke apart again. Mike said, "I found the rooms under it." Aaron drove the radio straight to the police the next morning. They kept it. He never heard anything more. Years later, out of pure obsession, he went searching online for information about the hotel and the property itself. He found an old article from the 1950s about renovation work after a partial collapse. The article mentioned that workers had discovered sealed service spaces and undocumented sublevels beneath part of the hotel, likely connected to much older structures on the land from before the hotel was built. Those areas were supposedly filled in and closed off. Supposedly. Aaron showed me the article once, and underneath the headline was a black and white photo of hotel staff standing on the front steps. There were maybe 20 people in the picture. Bellhops, cleaners, kitchen workers, managers. And 2 men off to one side wearing maintenance uniforms. Both of them were tall. Both thin. And one of them had the exact same face Aaron described hearing at the cellar door when he said, "You don't need to hide down here." The last story happened to me, and after everything that happened, I haven't gone near an abandoned place since. Mine was an abandoned school. A real school. Not some little country building either. It was a closed middle school on the edge of a neighborhood that had slowly emptied out over the years. The district built a new one somewhere else, and just boarded up the old campus. There were rumors the building was going to be demolished, but for whatever reason it sat there year after year with chain link fencing around it, and keep out signs nobody listened to. I got involved because of my younger brother Tyler. He was 16 at the time, reckless, and obsessed with doing things for social media. Not huge public accounts or anything, just enough friends and followers that he felt the need to keep doing dumber things to entertain them. One Friday night he didn't come home. That by itself wasn't normal. Tyler could be irresponsible, but he usually answered his phone eventually. By midnight my mom was furious. By 1 in the morning she was scared. Around 1:30, one of Tyler's friends finally answered me. He sounded nervous right away. He told me Tyler and 3 others had gone into the abandoned school around 10 to film a challenge video. The friend I was talking to, named Evan, had stayed outside because he was too freaked out to go in. According to him, the others were supposed to be inside 10 minutes max. Only 2 of them came back out. Tyler wasn't one of them. Neither was another kid named Marissa. The 2 who came out had apparently panicked and taken off. They told Evan Tyler and Marissa were messing around in the basement hallway and didn't follow when everyone ran. "Ran from what?" I asked. Evan kept saying, I don't know, they just said somebody was in there." I remember grabbing my keys before the call was even over. I should have called the police first. But when it's your brother, logic disappears. The school was only 15 minutes away. When I got there, the streets around it were quiet and empty. A few porch lights were on in nearby houses, but otherwise the whole area looked dead. The school sat behind a sagging fence with black windows and a cracked parking lot full of weeds. Evan was waiting in his car across the street. When I pulled up, he got out immediately and looked like he was about to cry. I said, "Tell me exactly what happened." He kept glancing toward the school while he talked. The kids had gone in through a broken side door near the gym. At some point they ended up in the basement because one of them heard noises and said they should check the boiler room for content. A few minutes later, everyone heard a loud bang from somewhere nearby, then footsteps, then what one girl described as someone whispering in the hall. That was enough for most of them to bolt. Tyler and Marissa had been behind the rest because Tyler was filming. I called Tyler 3 times while Evan was talking. Straight to voicemail. Then I called Marissa. Same thing. I told Evan to stay outside and call 911 if I wasn't back in 10 minutes. He said, "You're actually going in there?" I didn't answer. I climbed the fence, crossed the parking lot, and found the side door hanging open a few inches. The second I stepped inside, I smelled mildew, dust, and old paper. Schools have a unique smell even when they're active. A mix of cleaner, dry air, books, cafeteria food, gym floors. Under all the rot, this place still had a trace of that. That made it worse somehow. Like the building remembered what it used to be. My phone flashlight lit up a hallway lined with faded blue lockers. Bulletin boards were still on the walls with torn borders hanging down. Classroom doors stood open. A trophy case near the office had cracked glass and dusty plaques inside. I started yelling Tyler's name right away. No answer. Just my own voice traveling down the hall. I moved faster than I should have, checking room after room. Science lab. Art room. Library. Nothing. Just old furniture, water damage, and the constant feeling that I was not alone. There were sounds in the building, but not in any pattern I understood. Little taps above the ceiling. A distant door creaking. What sounded once like a locker slamming far away. I kept telling myself that abandoned buildings make noise. Air, temperature, animals settling. Normal stuff. Then I found Tyler's backpack outside the stairwell leading to the basement. That stopped all the excuses in my head. The bag was lying against the wall like he had dropped it in a hurry. One strap was torn. His charger and a water bottle had spilled out onto the floor. I shouted his name again and got no reply. I went down. The basement steps were concrete, and the air turned colder almost immediately. The flashlight beam shook because my hand was shaking. At the bottom was a narrow corridor with painted cinder block walls. Pipes ran overhead. There were storage rooms and maintenance doors on either side. The school district had left old signs down there. Storage. Laundry. Boiler. And farther down, a sign with an arrow, archives. That was already strange to me. Why would a middle school have archives in the basement? But I didn't stop to think about it much then. About halfway down the corridor, I heard something. A voice. Very faint. I froze and listened. It came again, and this time I knew it was Tyler. He was shouting, but it sounded muffled, like there were walls between us. Hello? I started moving toward the sound. Tyler! No response. I followed the corridor to a heavy metal door with a small square window. Archives was painted above it in peeling black letters. The window had been covered from the inside with paper or cardboard, so I couldn't see through. I grabbed the handle. Locked. I banged on it. Tyler! From somewhere beyond the door, I heard what sounded like movement. Then his voice again, weaker this time. Don't! He cut off suddenly. I hit the door harder. Tyler! Nothing. I looked around and saw an old fire extinguisher cabinet on the wall nearby, smashed open. The extinguisher was still there. I pulled it free and used it to hammer the handle and lock until the whole mechanism bent enough for the door to pop inward. The room beyond was not an archive. Not really. It might have been once. There were shelves full of old boxes and record books along the walls. But the center of the room had been cleared out. There were folding chairs, lanterns, extension cords, a generator in the corner, plastic tubs, blankets, and on one wall, there were dozens of photographs taped up. Photos of the school, hallways, classrooms, basement corridors, exterior shots at night. Some were recent. Some had people in them. Teenagers climbing the fence. Kids in costumes. A couple making out in the parking lot. 2 skateboarders near the loading dock. All taken without them knowing. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it. There was another door at the back of the room, standing slightly open. That's where Tyler's voice had come from. I ran to it and found a narrow records room full of shelves. Tyler was there, sitting on the floor with his hands zip-tied behind his back and duct tape around one ankle. The second he saw me, his eyes went wide. Instead of looking relieved, he looked terrified. He shouted, "Get out!" That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. I turned and saw a man standing in the archive room doorway. At first glance, he looked like a janitor or maintenance worker. Dark jacket, work pants, keys hanging from his belt, gray hair, thin face. But he wasn't startled to see me. He was calm. Too calm. He held one hand out slightly like he was approaching a stray animal. "You shouldn't be here," he said. I grabbed a broken metal shelf rod off the floor and backed into the records room. "Who are you?" He ignored the question and looked at Tyler. "I told you someone would come looking." Tyler was crying now. I had never seen that before in my life. The man took one step forward. "You're making this much harder than it has to be." I can still hear his voice when I think about that night. It wasn't loud. It wasn't crazy. He sounded tired. Annoyed. Like we were inconveniencing him. I said, "Back up." He smiled just a little. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He reached to the wall beside the doorway and shut off the main lantern in the archive room. The whole space dropped into near darkness except for my phone light. And from somewhere deeper beyond the archive room, I heard movement. More than one set of footsteps. I had thought it was just him. Tyler was yelling now. "Go, go!" The man rushed the doorway. I swung the metal rod and connected with his shoulder or neck. He grunted and stumbled sideways. I grabbed Tyler under the arm and tried to pull him up even though his hands were still bound. We pushed past into the archive room. In the weak flashlight beam I saw shapes moving at the far end near another open passage. At least 2 people. No way were we making it calmly back the way I came. So I did the dumbest brave thing I've ever done and kicked the generator over. It sputtered, sparked, and the room went mostly dark. Somebody shouted. Tyler and I ran. He could barely move with one ankle taped and his hands tied, but adrenaline kept him upright. We hit the basement corridor and turned left. Wrong direction. I knew it almost immediately because the hallway narrowed and ended at a locked maintenance gate. Behind us came yelling and fast footsteps. I spun around, shoved Tyler against the wall, and started sawing at the zip ties on his wrists with a jagged piece of metal I'd grabbed from the broken shelf. My hands were slipping. Tyler was panicking. The footsteps were getting closer. Then, from the other side of the maintenance gate behind us, a voice said, "You kids lost?" I nearly screamed. A flashlight beam shone through the bars. It was a police officer. Evan had actually called 911. I shouted for help so loudly my throat hurt. The officer took one look at us, radioed something, and began unlocking the gate from his side while another beam appeared farther back. More officers. The footsteps behind us stopped. Then silence. The gate opened and we stumbled through. When the officers rushed past us toward the archives, I remember one of them asking, "How many are in there?" I said, "At least 3. They searched the basement, then the entire school. They found the archive room, the chairs, the generator, the photos, the supplies. But they didn't find the people. According to the police, there were multiple ways in and out of old maintenance areas under the school, some of which connected to storm access tunnels and utility spaces. Whoever had been using that place knew the layout better than anyone responding that night. Tyler and I went to the hospital. He had bruises, mild dehydration, and a sprained ankle. He wouldn't say much at first, but later he told me what happened. He and Marissa had been messing around in the basement hall after the others ran. Tyler thought he heard someone calling for help from behind the archive door. He started filming, joking around, saying they'd found some creepy hidden room. That's when the man grabbed them. Not from inside the archive. From behind. He had come from a side corridor they never noticed. Tyler said there were at least 2 others helping him. One of them wore a school security jacket even though the school had been closed for years. Marissa had tried to run. Tyler never saw where they took her. That part haunted me almost as much as finding him. Police did eventually find Marissa. Alive. 2 days later. She was wandering 3 miles away near a drainage canal, in shock and unable to explain much except that she had been in the walls. The official story in the local news was that transients had been living under the abandoned school and briefly held 2 teenagers who entered the property. That was the clean version. The version that doesn't keep me up at night is much uglier. Because a detective came to our house a week later and asked Tyler to identify some items. One of them was a ring of old master keys. Another was a staff badge with a faded photo on it. The name was unreadable, but the photos showed the same thin gray-haired man I had hit with the metal rod. The detective told us the badge belonged to a custodian who had worked at the school years earlier. He died before the school closed. At least that's what district employment records said. My mom thought the detective had to be mistaken. Tyler didn't say anything. I didn't either. But then the detective showed us something else that had been found in one of the maintenance crawlspaces. A stack of dated notebooks. Each one had lists of names. Students. Teachers. Random people from the neighborhood. Some names had check marks beside them. Some had times and locations written next to them. Tyler's name was in the newest notebook. So was mine. And beside my name, written days before I ever went into that school, were 4 words. Comes if brother doesn't. The police fenced the place off tighter after that and finally demolished it the following year. Everybody in town acted relieved, like tearing the building down ended the nightmare. But when they cleared the site, workers discovered a section of old utility tunnel that wasn't on any official map. It ran under part of the basement, and then out beyond the property line. According to the demolition crew, there were signs that someone had been living down there for a long time. What they never found, though, were the notebook's missing volumes. Or all the people connected to the names inside them. And about 6 months after the school came down, Tyler got an envelope in the mail with no stamp and no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was taken at night from across our street. In the picture, our house was dark except for one lit bedroom window. Mine. On the back, in neat, careful handwriting, were the words, "You came faster than expected." Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories. If you want to share your story with us, send us at belladarktales@gmail.com.